You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. The time for change begins right now. When Minnesota golf courses were forced to close at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, Joel Livingood was already preparing for the next step. It's what he's done since taking over as GM at Interlachen Country Club in Edina, Minnesota in 2017. With a solid financial footing and a steady hand, Livingood has led his team and membership through one of the most extraordinary years in U.S. history. Thanks for joining us. Today, our guest is Joel Livingood, General Manager of Interlachen Country Club in Edina, Minnesota. And you may be familiar with the club as it's hosted major golf championships, including the 2008 U.S. Women's Open, the 2002 Solheim Cup, and of course, the 1930 U.S. Open won by the great Bobby Jones on his way to his Grand Slam, where Interlachen was the third leg of that journey. Now, what makes Livingood's story unique is part how he guided his team through 2020 with what he calls a relentless commitment to member experience. But it's also how he led the transformation of this storied club over the past few years. You see, when Joel got to the club in 2017, it was still feeling the effects of the 2008 recession. The existing membership model wasn't working with high member turnover, and there were many members shy of where they were before the recession. At the time, it was difficult hiring and retaining top talent, and a lack of trust had become pervasive, and it made it near impossible to operate the club efficiently. Needless to say, it wasn't on the same financial footing that it is today, with significant growth in the last 3 years, and now a 3-year wait list for golf membership. Of course, an $11 million investment in the club, $10 million of which was invested in non-golf related activities, has really helped. And all of this has given Livingood the ability to rally the troops in their relentless commitment to member experience, even during a global pandemic. Well, Joel, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Take me back to mid-March. Let's start there when Governor Walz signs the emergency executive order directing Minnesotans to stay home. What do you remember about that day, and what was your reaction at that time?
I don't know if it was just us, but it certainly felt like it came quickly here in Minnesota. I'll go back even a little bit further. I think it was the last week of February. I was on a plane flying back from the USGA annual meeting in Pinehurst, North Carolina, and they were talking about this COVID thing, but it certainly didn't have any bearing on my time there, my flight back. And fast forward a couple weeks later, I recall being in a team meeting, and we were sitting around the table saying, hey, this is clearly going to have an impact on us, and we need to start planning for how we're going to respond and react. And 2 days after that, or 3 days after that, it was really starting to make news. And the next thing we know, the governor put his stay-at-home order in place, and we had actually made the decision as an organization to close before he actually made that announcement. And that was primarily due just to the uncertainty and, our goal to provide a safe environment for our members to socialize and recreate. And to be honest, more importantly, a safe place for our employees to work. And when faced with uncertainty, we wanted to always be, 2 steps ahead, not 2 steps behind. And so we made that decision ourselves before the governor ultimately did. But it came quick, I think, and caught a lot of people by surprise. At least that's how we felt.
It was such an odd time. And I remember I was on a flight the week before. I was flying to Denver to actually visit one of our clients in Denver at the time. And it was almost like you were trying to figure out how seriously to take it. What was your message to the team? Because there must have been some skeptics within the team that were like, really? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, everybody at some level had that level of skepticism. And, our message to the team is we're not going to compromise on safety. And so until we know, we are going to approach this as if it's a serious situation. And we're going to always err on the side of being more conservative. And hey, the worst case scenario, if we do that, is we're going to decide to close and we could have been open. Well, then we'll reopen. What we didn't want to do was continue to operate and say, man, I wish we would have closed. And so we really took that approach all throughout the pandemic, and frankly still do today. I think obviously there's been some evolution and some ebbs and flows, and we've kind of now gotten to what I would call standard operating procedure for the COVID era. But we still ask ourselves that question as situations arise. And the reality is it's going to be better to overreact than underreact.
It was a scary time for all businesses. And I know in the club space, it was very scary, especially when, here in Minnesota, nearly the start of the golf season, and it was a very favorable spring.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about what you had done in advance of this that helped you stay equipped and really weather this fairly well. What were some of the things that, looking back, that you had done that really prepared you for this time?
Sure. Yeah, I think, fortunately, Interlaken was in a really strong position from both a membership and financial perspective. And so just like we were proceeding conservatively as related to operations, we were proceeding conservatively as related to our finances. And so as we forecasted out a worst case scenario for the balance of the year, we confident we could weather the storm. Even if some of our members decided to depart for various reasons. This obviously had a big impact on a lot of people economically, and we knew that we wouldn't necessarily be any different. And so we were prepared for that. But I think, honestly, as I look back, a lot of the work that we've done here at Interlaken over the last 3 years to build up our membership base and our wait list and be in a sound financial position gave us the confidence to make some of these decisions in what we thought were in the best interest and in the safety and well-being of our members and staff. And we knew that we could weather that even if the club had to remain closed for, an extended period of time. And fortunately, although it was longer than maybe a lot of folks would have liked in Minnesota, we got back to it. And COVID's been good for the private club and golf industry.
So I think for people who are familiar with Interlaken, and a lot of people who listen to this podcast are very familiar with you and with the club and the history that Interlaken has. And it may not surprise people to hear you say, well, we were okay financially and we were in good shape for that. But that wasn't always the case, right? I mean, when you came to the club in 2017, it was a very different scenario than it was, this year. Can you just talk a little bit about what went into that? Because, and the reason is I think there are some clubs who may not have been as sound financially, and they may be grasping a little bit to say, how do we get there? And you had some serious challenges when you arrived in 2017. Can you just talk through what you faced and what you did to get it to a point where you were really healthy to survive this thing?
Yeah, Interlaken, we're certainly fortunate, really strong brand and rich history in the game of golf. The club was established in 1909, and really our claim to fame came when Bobby Jones won at the third leg of his Grand Slam at the U.S. Open here in 1930, and really cemented us in golf history. And really that drove a lot of what the club was known for in years to come, and even still today, right? It's one of the top 100 golf courses in the United States and the number one golf course in Minnesota. And, following the recession in 2008, Interlaken, we rested on those laurels, and we looked to our place in golf history and our place as the best golf course in Minnesota to carry us when the world around us began to evolve. And golf is and will always be, one of the most important aspects of our club. But we learned that, the club needed to evolve and become just as important to all of our, just as important to the families and the non-golfers as it is the golfers. And so we've made significant investments in our non-golf facilities while still, maintaining our golf course to the highest level. And that allowed us to attract a new generation of young families, and the club is growing significantly over the last 3 years, and now we're proud to say we've got a 2 to 3 year wait list again, and that strength and that in our membership financial position allowed us to make good decisions today. So
you make it sound simple. It's, but yet some of the things you did, and just to have, pursue that a little bit more, is really focus on the experience, right? The family experience. How for people who say, I get that, but how do you do that? And maybe maybe there are other GMs listening to this might go, I would never ask that, but I'd love to know what that means to Joel Livingood at Interlochen when you say focusing on experience.
Yeah, so I'll put it into three buckets. And so the first bucket is from a financial perspective, we knew that our financial model had to sustain the ups and downs in the economy, as well as the changing preferences of members. And so at the onset, we made some changes to improve our operations, to make a commitment to eliminating the deferred capital that we had, and then investing in our facilities, right? Create the foundation for that experience. It's going to be the place where all of our members spend their time. The second piece was ensuring that our governance model would support our management team's ability to improve that experience day in and day out. Conversations in our boardroom shifted from, we joked, picking the Easter brunch menu to what are we thinking about in 2, 5, and 10 years. We spend very little time in the room talking about what happened last month, and we spend a lot of time talking about where we're going to be. And so there was this focus at the board level on the future, which allowed our management team, empowered our team to make good decisions every day to create the experience that we were trying to achieve. And then the last piece is, as we think about that experience, there's a relentless commitment to make it personal, make it special, make it memorable in every facet. So we'll always say, everything matters and fine is never okay. And so we bring that relentless attention to detail in everything that we do. And I think it's the culmination of a lot of little things that make the experience here stand out. And it's why during times like we're in today, we think our members see value in their experience here and why they're spending so much time here.
Let's just take a quick sideshow on this. And I want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole around the governance thing.
Sure.
Because in many ways, that is also what held you guys together through a lot of this is trust in your leadership, the board putting trust in you to be able to make the right decisions. In your experience and what you've learned at your time before your time at Interlochen and during, what is the breakdown and how can other clubs, I think of it as an outsider, it's a trust thing, right? I go, it's a trust thing. What is it that clubs that struggle with this need to get over to be able to really reach this sort of like healthy organizational level?
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done. And I think everybody in our industry recognizes that. And I've had varying levels of success at achieving and implementing the governance, governance best practices at each of the clubs that I've been at. But I think there's a few things that stand out, a few keys to success that I've put into practice each time, and certainly things that we rely on here that work. And the first is at the board, committee, and management level, there's very clear lines of roles and responsibilities. So we rely on a roles and responsibilities matrix that very clearly outlines who makes decisions about what. It's very easy to see when looking at that document that there's a very clear line between the decisions that management makes and the board makes. And what that allows is, one, it allows us the freedom, the flexibility. It empowers us to make those decisions day to day, which ultimately, if we weren't empowered to make those decisions day to day, they'd have an impact on the club in terms of its experience, in terms of the finances. Sometimes you need to be empowered to make decisions day to day. And then there's trust and understanding across the board. And then I think the other piece is that it ultimately starts with trust from the membership. The membership trusts the board, the membership trusts the management team. And that starts with good communication and transparency. And so we share a lot of information with the membership. We share that information often. We ask for their feedback often. We engage them in important processes and decisions. But we're also clear about the decisions that that do rest in the hands of management, and we trust these professionals to make good decisions. And we're and sometimes we don't make the best decision, and we're the first to say, hey, here was our intention. Here's why we decided to do that. Here's what we learned, and so here's what we're going to do moving forward. And we apologize that wasn't the right call. But because of our transparency and communication and honesty, we're able to maintain that level of trust that, ultimately allows us to move the ball down the field every day. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to hire a team of professionals and entrust the management of the club to them, you've got to empower them to do that job. And our board does that, and they hold us accountable for doing that. And they're very engaged in the process, but they're engaged in the right things. And that's what's allowed us to maintain the financial health and membership health and ultimately deliver the experience that we think we do today.
Awesome. So back to so with that, now you've got a good foundation to be able to handle adversity. So the governor signs the executive order to return to golf on Friday, April 17th. Mm-hmm. And I remember that day because I remember thinking, hallelujah. And then I remember thinking to myself, because living here in Minnesota as well, I was like, oh my gosh, this is about when the golf season would start anyway. We haven't lost really anything. But let me ask you this. Did you anticipate the amount of golf and the amount of activity that you had at your club this summer?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it is unbelievable. You think about what they were saying about the game of golf over the course of the last, 5 or 6 years. And this rivals the Tiger Woods era. Interlachen will do about 35% more rounds of golf this year than we have in the last 5 years on average. And our members played 50% more golf than they have in the previous 5 years on average. And so, I'll tell you, one of the benefits of our governance model during COVID and as we experienced the level of play that we did, we were making decisions on the fly, right? We were adapting policies and processes to, conform with the governor's orders and restrictions, and then to, just manage that level of demand. And that nimbleness was important. It was important to be able to confidently make decisions quickly to ensure we did everything we could to provide the members a safe and accessible experience all summer long. But it's been unbelievable for the game of golf, and certainly a lot of challenges and a lot of sad, bad things that have happened over the course of the pandemic, but certainly a silver lining for those of us in this industry and for the game.
I found it really interesting in just talking to clubs and both the daily fees and the privates and how much golf was being played. And you kept hearing the same things that, without dad traveling or mom traveling for that matter, without the kids playing sports, travel baseball and travel things like that, we were getting so much more play on our golf courses. Mm-hmm. What do you think clubs learned about their members and learned about the club experience through this time?
Hey, we're talking a lot about that right now as the season wraps up, and we're less focused on day to day, and we're able to focus more on long-term planning and strategic thinking. And I think 2021 is going to be a lot more like 2020 than 2019. And so I think there's a lot of things that, we'll do differently to prepare for that level of volume and activity. For us, though, specifically, we learned a couple things. And the first one is, and I think this is going to drive a significant portion of our future planning, is that, the most important thing we do, and this has always been true, but the most important thing we do is deliver an experience for our membership. And one of the things we learned this year, because we had essentially no guests on property, we limited guest play. We stopped hosting non-member functions. We really didn't even host any member functions where there's a large number of guests attending. And so that allowed us to focus solely on the member experience. And I think it caused us to reflect to say, we've also always focused on the member experience, but not in this way, right? We were pulled and distracted in other ways because of all these other activities that we thought had contributed significantly to us financially and maybe by the way of some additional profits benefited the member experience. And I think what we learned is this focus on the member experience day in and day out forever is the most important thing we can do. And we can do a better job at it. These other things were distracting us a little bit. So I think for Interlachen personally, our business model is going to change a little bit to really refocus all those efforts on the member experience. Something we've said we always do, but I think we can do a better job now that we've seen it. That obviously has implications in terms of revenue and dollars we generate, and so we're going to have to figure that out. But we think in this climate, despite the fact that we'll get back to normal someday, the club we've actually improved our value proposition for our members. Right, they're playing far more golf, they're working out here more, they're dining here more, they're playing tennis here more, they're going to the pool more, and so we think that gives us an opportunity, one, to refocus on that, and two, then to double down on those efforts. How can the club continue to be really the third place in our members' lives? They're going home. Work is different now. They're either working from home, maybe they can work from the club. How can the club become part of that model? But we're at work, we're at home or school, we're at the club. And so for us moving forward, I think that this increased level of activity is here to stay for a while, and it's going to be incumbent upon us then to capitalize on that and continue to improve that experience and value proposition for members long into the future.
We talked about this a little bit in advance in our pre-production call, and it's really around that idea that what you'd hear people say is, yes, our play is up, rounds are up, engagement at the club is up, but we lost a lot of events, a lot of weddings, a lot of Monday outings. It's just maybe a little bit deeper into what you're already saying, which is you found that the trade-off may be negligible, and that this just sort of forced your hand to say, what if, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think you hear your clubs talk often about the importance of that banquet business, the number of weddings they have, the number of holiday parties. And I think if you really press folks on their profitability of those events, it's easy to put together a pro forma and say, yeah, we're making 30-40% margin on these. And I think we would have produced that pro forma too if someone would have asked previously. But what we've seen now is we've not had those functions and adjusted our operations to essentially not have to support those functions. It has had a financial impact, but it hasn't been as great as we thought it would be. But it's allowed us then to focus solely on that member experience, which is ultimately the business we're in. We're not in the wedding business. I'm in the wedding business for a member whose daughter grew up here her whole life and dreamed of getting married at Interlaken. That's a function of that member experience. But we're not in the business of the wedding for somebody who's the friend of a friend of a friend of a member who is willing to sponsor their event here. And I think we're going to look hard at that over the course of the next handful of months and really understand where we're going to spend our time and our money and focus our team's efforts.
So as we look into 2021, what will your plan be if you go into the next season, kind of like how this past season wrapped up? Business as usual, like in the new COVID world? Is that kind of how it's going to go?
It is unbelievable, despite how different it is, how normal it feels. Not just at work, but at home too. I was just penning an update to the membership, and I said the COVID era has now become business as usual. We're 6 months into this, and our team is into a routine. Our members are into a routine. I think we're all anxious to get back to normal. But from our planning perspective, I assume we'll be building out a few different scenarios for 2021. But as I've shared with our team and membership, we believe 2021 is more like 2020 than 2019. So, we're planning to proceed under the assumption that, activity levels of the club are very similar. Members use the club in very similar ways with similar restrictions. And of course, if we can back off from those a little bit, we'll all be plenty happy. But we're going to be prepared to deliver an even better experience next year under similar circumstances.
I know you, as a good leader, you like to give credit where credit is due, and you've got a great team there as well. Can you just talk a little bit about how the team rallied around this, extraordinary circumstances here?
Yeah, no, there's so many people that deserve credit for our success here, not just this year, but in particular over the course of the last 3 years as we've gone through this transformation. And, frankly, it starts with the support of our membership and their support of our team. We were just in a strategic planning session with our board earlier this year, and we had a couple objectives up on the screen, and the first was related to the member experience, and the second was related to our employee experience. And one of our directors stopped and said, those should be reversed. And I truly think that is something that all of our members embrace. And so it starts with their support. But I'm very lucky to be surrounded by a lot of people that are better at a lot of different things than I am. And, it's been really fun over the last few years to build that team. We're all at a very similar place in life and have all become very good friends. And, as I tell people, it's like everybody on the team, like I would enjoy having a beer. And I think that's important. People always talk about, the line between personal and professional. And I think in today's world, and in particular in our business, the amount of time that we spend here on the work that we spend it on, those two things bleed together. And if they don't, it doesn't work. And so they have handled the adversity and uncertainty of the last, 6 to 9 months better than we ever could have expected, with a really whatever it takes kind of attitude. We have people working in different departments across the club. Our golf professional staff was working on the grounds crew for the first few weeks of the season. We've had folks jump from different food and beverage departments, from the locker room to food and beverage, from valet to the golf course. And honestly, that's been a learning as well, and in a very positive way. We've built stronger relationships across departments by people, really being forced to go work over there. Right? Our golf professional staff would have never gone and worked with the grounds crew at the onset of the season. Yeah. But I can tell you, our director of golf course and grounds and our head golf professional and I have all talked about how do we do this every year, because this was important. It improved communication. It built stronger relationships. It gave a good understanding of what they do. And so been really, really proud of the work they've done, the creative ideas that people have brought to the table to enhance our food and beverage offerings, to maintain a world-class golf experience with all these new rules and regulations and different touch points. And so it's been fun to watch the team come together during this time and come out even stronger on the other end.
Yeah, how a group responds in crisis says a lot about the culture of the organization. And you talk about bleeding the lines between professional and personal. I mean, my gosh, how many conference calls have you been on? I know I've been on a bunch where someone's in a hat and they're in a T-shirt. They're sitting in their house somewhere. I mean, we've been in people's homes like never before at this point. But let me ask you this: just a last question and thought for you is.
Sure.
I think you're a silver linings kind of guy, and it's and this has been such a crazy year. What do you think is the most important lesson you're going to take away as a GM from this year?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think the first is it's the importance of having the right people in the right seats on the bus. As we just talked, I mean, we couldn't have done this year what we did without the people that we have, and so. As much as there will be this renewed focus on the member experience moving forward, there'll be even a greater renewed focus on our team moving forward. We'll be doubling down on those investments and those priorities to make sure their experience here is the best it can possibly be. And then the second portion of that is how fortunate I am to work in this industry, in this business, and in particular here at Interlaken. You talk about the support of the membership during this period of time when their access to the club was limited, how they used the club was forced to be used in a different way, the kind words, the support, their willingness to help and support our staff, unwavering. And I don't think you get that in every industry and in every job. I'm of all the friends that I grew up with and went to school with and still socialize with, I'm the only one that's doing what I do. And when I listen to their experiences in the workplace and with their customers, that level of support isn't the same. And I think that's unique to private clubs. That sense of family certainly reminds you you're doing the right thing at the right place.
Awesome. Joel, thanks so much for your time today and for sharing your experiences with us. All right. Continued luck this year and into 2021.
Best to you as well. Thanks, Ed.
All right. Thanks, Joel. And thanks for joining us today. If you find this podcast helpful, be sure to subscribe and stay connected to us at storytellermn.com. Until then, keep crushing your club marketing.